Hitchcock remains an icon of cinema. Towards the end of his life, he was the most recognisable film director in the world, a chat show regular with a CV that boasted such unforgettable classics as The 39 Steps, Vertigo, Psycho, and The Birds.
They're attacking again. Well, Melanie, you stay in here. Come on out.
Look at the gas. That man's lighting a cigar.
Hey, you! Watch out! Don't drop that match! Look out! Get out of there!
Mr. Run!
Watch out! Look out! Look out! Watch out!
Full of tension and danger, this scene from one of the director's later works encapsulates what Hitchcock called pure cinema, building a story through editing with minimal dialogue and often choosing sound effects over incidental music. Again and again, in his long career of over 50 movies, Hitchcock would always prioritise visual over verbal storytelling, as he explained in a 1936 interview.
Above all, it is the picture which is the thing. I try to tell my story, so much so in pictures, that if by any chance the sound apparatus broke down in the cinema, the audience would not fret and get restless because the pictorial action would still hold them.
Controversial and innovative, admired and feared, and arguably Britain's most important ever filmmaker, Alfred Hitchcock was in his heart a silent movie director right through his career. Pictures, not sound, remained the thing. So let's discover that very silent picture training Hitchcock took. His first 10 movies were made between 1925 and 1929, with a wide variety of settings and plots, showcasing British silent cinema in its last days at its best. Beautiful long shots and landscapes, and intimate, wonderfully acted close-ups, alongside innovative special effects that play with the cinema-goer's active role as a voyeur. Like this giant champagne glass attached to the camera that gives the illusion of a point of view. Training that led to outsized props of a finger and a telephone to reflect the name of a much later movie, when even a 1950s camera couldn't achieve that closer shot. It was an apprenticeship in plot, character, lighting, editing, suspense and horror that he would draw upon continuously into the era of sound. Psycho remains his masterpiece and biggest financial and cultural success, a culmination of nearly 4 decades of experimenting with moving pictures, but in its very essence sometimes feels like a silent picture from the 1920s. Now, let's go back to the beginning of the story.
This is the very busy Leytonstone High Road, where Alfred Hitchcock was born on the 13th of August 1899. Now this amazing mural is close to where the family lived, in a greengrocer's, and that site is actually this petrol station.
The area has changed a lot since Victorian times. Here's Hitchcock's father William outside the store with his older brother William Jr. around the time Alfred was born.
William Hitchcock would branch out into selling fish. He'd bring his whole family, his wife, his 2 sons and his daughter, here to Limehouse in the aptly named Salmon Lane. Sadly, number 175, where they lived above his fishmongers, again, is no longer here. And further up the street, the family also owned a fish and chip shop. As historian Peter Ackroyd has stated, Limehouse was a rough and raucous part of the East End of London, close to the bustling London docklands of the River Thames. Public houses like this, the Prince Regent, Hitchcock's local, were open all day until past midnight. And gin only cost a penny a glass.
The future millionaire Hollywood director would live here for the next 20 years until he got married in one of the busiest and poorest parts of London. But as the son of Catholic parents, religion would also play its part in his upbringing.
Aged 11, Alfred was sent to the strict Catholic boarding school, St Ignatius College, here in Stamford Hill, behind this church.
Hitchcock would be subjected to an education of confession, discipline and spectacle that is reflected in many of his films. It was not a happy time. He was overweight and smelt of fish. He usually played alone and was nicknamed Cocky. The lonely young man's escape would be the bustling West End. Memorising timetables and travelling alone on buses, trains, trams and boats, going both to the theatre and the early cinemas that had just opened. And he loved attending trials at the Old Bailey too. The city would prove a long-lasting inspiration for him, and the London Underground would feature in his first films, including this early escalator. But a childhood in London would also instill in him a sense of fear.
Well, I have a vague recollection of being scared by a policeman. I think that when I was probably about 4 or 5 years of age, being sent with a note to the local police station and being shut in a cell as a punishment for some mishap or I don't even know what it was for. I was probably unjustly incarcerated at the time.
Unsurprisingly, a distrust of the forces of law and order would be another theme of Hitchcock's work. As he grew up, he developed a macabre obsession with the tales of true crime in the British press, as well as becoming a fan of the disturbing and horrific tales of Edgar Allan Poe.
Throughout this time, William Hitchcock was suffering from the chronic emphysema that would take his life in November 1914. With an ailing father, the teenage Alfred would enrol on an engineering course that would lead to a steady job here in the City of London. Throughout World War I, he would work at W.T. Henley's Telegraph Works at number 13, Blomfield Street.
I got a job in an engineering firm that made electric cables. Clerical job, but you had to have some knowledge of electricity, you see. And while I was there, I got into the advertising department. And I became a layout man, designing ads.
Mm-hmm. You were quite young at the time.
Yeah, well, I was about 18 then. 17 or 18. And then I found out that a company called Famous Players Lasky were opening a studio in London. And I said to the advertising manager, I think I can get some extra work here by designing their titles, which is the same as designing ads. It's words and picture.
When the Islington studio was taken over by British company Gainsborough Pictures, the imaginative and hard-working Hitch, as he was known to his friends, started contributing script and design ideas, which brought him to the attention of studio boss Michael Bulkin, later head of Ealing Studios. Bulkin teamed Hitchcock with experienced director Graham Cutts. Hitch would bring visual flair to the output of this rather pedestrian of filmmakers, contributing to a series of films starring American actress Betty Compson. Their big hit, Woman to Woman, is now lost, but fragments of the follow-up, The White Shadow, were discovered 10 years ago. Hitchcock adapting the screenplay from a novel. From what survives, it seems like quite a dull picture, but Compson is excellent in the dual role of contrasting sisters, one good, one bad. The plot plays with the theme of mistaken identity that reappears in so many of Hitchcock's pictures later. But the footage does reveal that Cutts was no director of drama, comedy, or suspense, although the double exposure techniques are effective, allowing Compson's dual personas to act against each other. By now, Hitchcock had met Alma Reville, a gifted film editor and screenwriter herself, who became his best friend and best collaborator for the rest of his life. They would be married in 1926 and had one daughter, Patricia, who would later appear in some of her father's movies after they all moved to Hollywood in 1939. This stable personal life would provide Hitchcock with the confidence to develop as a filmmaker in his own right, with Alma contributing to scripts and acting as editor and assistant director. The most innovative films of the time were then coming out of Germany, influenced by the ideas of Expressionism, highly stylized films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu, using lighting, editing and perspective to create a new kind of thrilling cinema. Bulkin now sent Cutts, Alfred and Elmer to the Ufer studios in Berlin, where the great F.W. Murnau was making his latest masterpiece.
I remember when I was working there, our picture was called The Blackguard, but they were making The Last Laugh. And in those days, it's just the opposite to what happens today. Everything was done on the lot. And it didn't matter what the set was, they'd build it. And I remember in The Last Laugh, Jannings, it was a story about the reverence that the Germans have for the uniform. And it's the only film ever made that told the story purely pictorially, without titles, without a word. Of course, it was silent films in those days anyway. And they even built a hotel with the lobby and all the streets outside, with all the traffic and everything. And they even built a railroad station with the great big glass roof and the locomotive and the passengers moving backwards and forwards. And they were, to me, prodigious jobs of production. Yes.
This is the film Hitch was referring to, and it's a truly bizarre curiosity. Cutts' attempt at expressionist cinema is not in the same league as Murnau, and he seemed thoroughly bored of the project, despite the brilliant art design from Hitch. He ran out of the studio with his latest mistress, leaving Alfred and Alma to finish the film. The Blackguard seems to have been the last straw for both filmmakers, but it gives a hint of what was to come from the precocious younger man. It shows off Hitch's love of a good staircase, which would become a bit of an obsession in later films, providing a way to get a sense of scale and perspective on screen. As Hitchcock revealed in a 1960 interview, however, he and Cutts had already clashed over another set of steps in their first film together.
I remember once in the picture Woman to Woman, we had a big Park Lane house, and it was the entrance hall and the reception. Now, when they came into the set, there was this grand staircase going up with a balcony on each side, and back to us was the front door. But at the top of the stairs, there was no set at all, no wall, nothing. So I said, well, how can we shoot this? You know, they were expecting to do the conventional shot of from the door, looking up the stairs, and the balcony, and the hostess at the top, and the people going up. And I said, no, you take the shot from the top of the stairs, looking down. They said, why that? I said, because the hostess is at the top of the stairs. And everybody coming in will be seen coming through the doors, up the stairs, and be greeted in the foreground. That way, I said, you will have the set in the background for the whole sequence.
And decades later, Hitch was still working his magic with such a set to reveal a vital plot point. The delights of working with Ingrid Bergman was still 20 years away, but Alfred and Alma loved their time on a German film set, and when Balkan saw the results, it was clear that his two newest filmmakers, both still aged only 26, were ready to helm their first feature. Filmed in Munich and Italy, The Pleasure Garden is actually a tale of Britain and its empire. Largely set in the West End that Hitch knew so well, it opens with another cool staircase shot and constantly plays with the idea of the point of view. It's a funny, exciting and sexy debut which follows the fortunes of two contrasting showgirls, one a romantic, one an ambitious vamp, who both suffer at the hands of unscrupulous men. It's very much a film about working class female experience and features great performances from both its American leading ladies and some wonderful camera work from the gifted and aristocratic Italian cameraman Baron Ventimiglia. The script was by the most accomplished screenwriter in the British film industry, the now unjustly forgotten Elliot Stannard, another key figure in Hitchcock's career who would go on to contribute to all of the director's screenplays of the silent era. You can see the same team at work here, shooting their next feature, Hitch, Alma, and behind the camera, Ventimiglia. The Mountain Eagle is now a lost film, a melodrama set in Kentucky but filmed in the Australian Tyrol, and the holy grail for Hitchcock fans, although the director himself called it terrible. Here is another key aspect of the director's work. No subsequent film would be quite the same as the one before. The sheer variety of subjects and genres, despite the use of the same crew and often actors in these early years, will become very apparent. Balkan recalled Hitchcock and his team to London for another adaptation in 1926. The Lodger was based on a successful novel and a play inspired by the murders of Jack the Ripper. This would be Hitch's last chance, as neither of his first movies had met with the approval of the powerful distributor of Gainsborough Pictures, C.M. Wolfe, so were sitting on a shelf. Nobody had seen them. Unfortunately, first test screenings fell flat for The Lodger too, so Balkan, still backing his young director, brought in famous American poster artist Ted McKnight Coffer to design new titles and a new editor, Ivor Montague. Both men were members of the influential London Film Society, as were the Hitchcocks, that showed the latest international films, including exciting work from Soviet Russia, like this wonderful comedy. Chess Fever edits together comic actors with a real-life chess tournament. Sharing such innovative movies, Montague explained, aim to fertilise British film ideas. And it did. Happily, Montague's tighter cut of The Lodger with fewer titles was a hit with the studio, getting the picture a release date. Hitchcock still enthusiastically raved about the editing 38 years later for a TV interview.
Then I followed one blonde home to her house, and down in the basement they're talking about it. And the lights begin to go down, slowly and slowly. And suddenly Mother says, Dad, put a shilling in the meter, the gas is going down. So Dad goes with a shilling to put in the meter. By this time the place is in darkness and there's a rat-tat-tat at the front door. Mother goes up to open the door and she opens it and Dad puts a shilling in the meter. You can imagine how the thing was quickly cross-cut. As the door opened, the gas came up. And there was a man standing with a cloak and a black bag, and obviously the Ripper standing there.
West End superstar Ivor Novello plays the title character, a nameless and enigmatic drifter suspected by the police and his landlady of being the serial killer known as the Avenger. In reality, the Lodger is on the case himself, seeking to expose the murderer of his sister. There are daring special effects throughout, including this extraordinary use of a glass floor for one set. And the tension in this scene, that features another unforgettable staircase, framed and filmed superbly by Ventimiglia, is almost unbearable here. The director would be justly proud of the end result, describing it in the third person as the first true Hitchcock film. The wrong man would remain another recurring trope in Hitchcock's career, a protagonist mistaken for somebody else who spends the film attempting to clear his name. One of the starkest examples of this plot would be Novello and Hitchcock's next project, Downhill, based on one of Novello's West End hits. It's not a classic, but if you can suspend your disbelief of the 34-year-old star playing a disgraced public schoolboy half his age, it's a very diverting drama. Framed by a pregnant vamp who seduces boys in her sweet shop, already you're interested. The scene where she identifies Novello's Roddy, not his guilty friend, as the father is silent Hitchcock at its best, bringing suspense and horror to the headmaster's office and ruin to another wrong man. The film is composed of some striking close-ups, a technique the director would never tire of, as seen in 1942's Shadow of a Doubt, Hitch's favourite of all his films. Kicked out from school to save the honour of his pal, Roddy's life does indeed eventually go downhill. Before his innocence is proved at the end, there are adventures on stage and in Paris and Marseille. Unsettling and disorientating images abound where a drunken Roddy, now a gigolo, is plagued by hallucinations that prefigure the art design and cinematography of much later movies. While Novello's intense and raw performance is evocative of many other damaged and obsessive heroes in Hitchcock's career, like James Stewart Scotty in Vertigo. Noel Coward was Hitchcock's direct contemporary, born in the same year. He was another working-class London genius, whose carefully honed public image and personality, like Hitch's, would eventually rival his own work. Coward's theatrical career was breaking through at exactly this time, and a 1925 Broadway hit provided the source material for the next Elliot Stannard script. The film version of Easy Virtue threw out Coward's sparkling dialogue, there is only one line from the play in the intertitles, and added in a flashback, taking up the first half with authentic glamorous locations. This explains the backstory of another interesting and flawed female protagonist, Isabel Jeans's glamorous divorcee, Larita Whittaker. Hitch even gives us cocktails in the south of France, a situation he would explore with more style and colour in To Catch a Thief 25 years later. Easy Virtue also displays the director's growing obsession with point-of-view shots to open a film. We've already seen the use of both opera and champagne glasses. Here, there's a judge's monocle. By now the most acclaimed film director in the country, Hitchcock was lured to British International Pictures with the promise of bigger budgets and better facilities. He would now have complete artistic control, and his debut feature for his new studio would be a departure, a screenplay he largely wrote himself with the assistance of Alma and Elliot Stannard. The Ring is an East End Rocky, and it's superb. The opening sequence was filmed at a specially constructed, fully functioning fairground set that local Londoners were invited to come to and simply enjoy themselves at. The montage ideas of editing from Soviet Russia are fully on display here. However, overall, it's a much more simply filmed piece, courtesy of the talented photographer Jack Cox, who would stay with Hitch for years. Hitchcock loved boxing, and this feels like an authentic depiction of that world, with a fairground fighter given a big break by the champion, who then steals his girl. The epic climax is a fight between the rivals that shows off the class divide in the sport that fascinated Hitch, between the fighters and the posh audience in their evening wear. It's filmed in a reconstruction of the Albert Hall, an early recreation of a famous landmark that Hitch could control, just as the German cinema did. The Ring was a huge hit, with the Daily Mail describing it as the greatest production ever made in this country. Love and marriage would be the key theme of Hitch's next project, another departure from the previous movie, turning to comedy this time, taken from a theatrical farce called The Farmer's Wife. As he was wont to do, he took an actor from the previous film, here the lovely Lillian Hall Davis, to lead the cast as Minter, the housekeeper for Farmer Sweetland, whose wife sadly dies in the opening scene, with one of the best last lines in film history. If The Ring had been a fairly conservative shoot by Hitchcock standards, this movie was quietly, brilliantly innovative, playing with points of view and featuring an agile camera that at times takes on the persona of a nosy, gossipy neighbour. In Hitchcock's hands, a sparky West End farce with lots of comic dialogue about the widowed Sweetland deciding on a new wife was transformed into a cinematic silent comedy with real heart. The broad yet sympathetic comic characters are given plenty of slapstick material, with a touch of melancholy that evokes the work of Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton. Hitchcock's use of montage was also becoming more playful, with close-up details here establishing the growing bond between Sweetland and Minter. Meanwhile, the location photography of the English countryside, completed by the director himself, still only 29, when Jack Cox fell ill, is gorgeous and got glowing reviews. Hitch's follow-up, the frothy and glamorous Champagne, didn't. A rather empty film where none of the characters are named, starring then megastar Betsy Balfour, about posh people losing their fortune, then getting it back. Balfour's performance is charming and natural, as seen in this great single-take example. But it exposes the artificiality of plot and setting, and unlike The Farmer's Wife, isn't actually funny. However, technically, it's very well filmed, with one or two memorable moments, and shows off brilliantly Hitchcock's ability to tell a story through sets, gestures, and facial expressions. There are very few intertitles to explain the rather spare plot. Perhaps it's best known today for the first example of a freeze frame in cinema, snatching a memory that turns into a photograph here. Despite the playful and ingenious camera work, the director would disown the film. Hitchcock's last purely silent film, The Manxman, was happily a return to form and another ode to the English landscape. Set in the Isle of Man and another adaptation of a novel and play, it was actually filmed in sunny Cornwall. The theme of the romantic triangle is further explored, but in a darker, more brutal fashion. Cox returned behind the camera with his best work for Hitch yet, as did the charming hunk Carl Brisson from The Ring, as a cuckolded fisherman, Pete. Pete asks his better educated friend Philip to look after his girlfriend while he goes to South Africa to seek his fortune, with disastrous results. As a departure from his previous brunette leading actress, Hitchcock cast delightful Czech blonde Annie Ondra as Pete's fiancée, Kate, the daughter of the local landlord, and a prototype for later complex, promiscuous blonde heroines played by Grace Kelly, Janet Leigh, and Tippi Hedren. Ondra is a revelation, giving Kate a natural and attractive naivete that Hitchcock capitalised upon. Tragic news comes later of Pete's death abroad. Kate and Philip grow close, and Kate becomes pregnant. Pete is not actually dead, marries Kate on his return, but the truth about the real father of the child cannot be hidden. In the end, a disgraced Kate and Philip are jeered out of the village by a mob, and Pete returns to the sea. A touch melodramatic, but a visual masterpiece, The Manxman would see the end of a run of poetic, almost timeless romances from the director. It would be followed by something utterly radical and contemporary, and arguably the most important film of Hitchcock's career. Hitchcock's script for Blackmail was based on a play by Charles Bennett, a man who would replace Elliot Stannard as the key screenwriter for the rest of Hitchcock's British movies, and helped establish the Hitchcock style in such classics as The Man Who Knew Too Much and The 39 Steps throughout the 1930s. And these would be talking pictures.
smiling at me, me, nothing but little blue skies. Do I see? Do.
Talkies, like The Jazz Singer and The Lights of New York, had arrived from America, but they had mainly been musicals. Blackmail, a thriller, was perhaps surprisingly chosen as the first British attempt. Did the new synchronised sound technology panic Hitchcock? He was asked 30 years later.
No, it didn't bother me at all. I just took to it like I won't say a duck takes to the water, unless it was sound, we'll say as a duck takes to a quack.
Around Hitch were his usual crew, and Annie Andra returned to lead the cast as Alice, a working-class girl who murders a rapist and is tormented by her secret being exposed. The shoot had been planned as a silent one, but Hitch quickly adapted the filming to allow for sound scenes. This important scene where Andra's Alice plays a somewhat unwise visit to Cyril Richards' charming artist is from the silent version of the film that was completed for those cinemas not yet modified for synchronised sound, and actually released after the talkie. The silent version of Blackmail should not be overlooked, and it works as a tenser and purer form of the story, but Hitch was looking to the future. Despite having to learn a new way of making a picture and the recasting of key roles for reshoots, he was delighted he could now adapt the play properly with dialogue. The engineer in him loved the technical challenge. He was smart enough to keep much of the silent footage, including this comedy cameo, letting pictures tell the majority of the story and allowing for an exciting climax in the British Museum. However, there remained one big problem. Ondra's Czech accent when she's playing a Cockney heroine.
Now, Miss Andra, you asked me to let you hear your voice on the talking picture.
But Hitch, you mustn't do that.
Why not?
Well, because I can speak well.
Do you realize the squad van will be here any moment?
No, really. Oh, my God, I'm terribly frightened.
Why? Have you been a bad woman or something?
Well, not just bad, but...
But you've slept with men.
Oh, no!
You have not. Come here. Stand in your place. Otherwise, it will not come out right, as the girl said to the soldier. That's enough.
A lovely insight into the Hitchcock set there. A solution was found. British actress Joan Barry was hired to speak Alice's lines off camera as Ondra mouthed the words. The result was an exciting, dynamic and modern police thriller. Hitchcock using dialogue and incidental music confidently and sparingly, and despite the dark subject matter, there's an entertainingly authentic depiction of the busy, gossipy East End Hitch knew so well.
I must say I feel the same way about that too. A good, clean, honest whack over the head with a brick is one thing. There's something British about that. But knives... No, knives is not right. I must say that's what I think and that's what I feel. Whatever the provocation, I could never use a knife. Now, mind you, a knife is a difficult thing to handle. I mean, any knife. I mean, if you use a pen knife, or a pocket knife, they wouldn't belong in. A butcher's knife.
Alice, cut us a bit of bread, will you?
Knife. What's that other knife? An exact knife. A knife is a dangerous thing. You must be careful of a knife. You come up against a knife. Oh, no. I mean, in Chelsea, you mustn't use a knife!
Yeah, you ought to have been more careful. Might have cut somebody with that.
100% entertainment. It's a transitional yet innovative movie for the director, and a risk that paid off handsomely with critics and audiences. Sound would eventually be the making of Hitch as a director. The family moved to Hollywood in 1939, and further tales of suspense would follow with witty repartee provided by great screenwriters such as Ben Hecht, John Michael Hayes and Ernest Lehman. Combining with the acting talents of Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman and Claude Rains, you see here in Notorious in 1946 Hitchcock's now complete mastery of the art form, and do look out for the director's customarily playful cameo too.
It's kind of your bride to invite me.
We both invite you, Mr. Devlin. We'll see that our guest is fed, my dear, and amused. You know what... Oh, excuse me. Madam Esterick, I'm so glad to see you.
This isn't going to be easy.
Why?
He's quite sensitive about you. He's going to watch us like a hawk.
Yes, he's rather jealous of anyone.
Where'd you get the key? Off his chain?
Yes.
Let's hope the liquor doesn't run out and start him down the cellar for more.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Quite a point.
Into the 1950s, there would be new partnerships with younger artists. Film composer Bernard Herrmann would add a further emotional dimension to the atmosphere of the classics Vertigo, North by Northwest and Psycho, while graphic designer Saul Bass would collaborate on storyboards, titles and posters, both helping lift this run of films into legendary status. As Hitchcock's output slowed into the 1960s, he became something of a Buddha-like sage to a new generation of filmmakers like Francois Truffaut, delivering lectures on his concept of pure cinema as seen here in his interview with the charming American chat show host Dick Cavett from 1972 to promote what would prove his penultimate film, Frenzy.
Well, I did the production section for Encyclopedia Britannica for the last edition, and in it I describe a scene such as in the picture Rear Window, where you have James Stewart, a close-up of him, and he looks, you see, and you cut, we'll say, for example, a woman nursing a baby. Now you go back to Mr. Stewart, and he smiles. So what have you demonstrated? That he's a nice, benevolent gentleman. Now take the middle piece of film away. He looks, he sees. Now cut to a girl in a bikini. And he smiles. Now he's a dirty old man.
And it's the exact same smile.
Exact same smile, the same look. The subject is changed. I dare say you are wondering why I am floating around London like this. I am on the famous Thames River, investigating a murder. Rivers can be very sinister places. And in my new film, Frenzy, this river, you may say, was the scene of a very horrible murder.
It's a woman!
Another necktie murder.
Of course, one can never be sure where danger lurks. They tell me a dreadful crime was committed right in this building. My investigation next led me to this innocent alley, of which there are hundreds in London. But I don't think we should stay long. Something unpleasant is about to happen.
Frenzy is a jarring return to Hitchcock's London roots after 3 decades of glamorous Hollywood productions. A loose reworking of The Lodger with a far more explicit and almost squalid depiction of the hunt for a serial killer and a return to the wrong man plot. It shows Hitch remained haunted by his past. The trailer depicts his now established public persona as a celebrity, a veneer of English gentility that masked a dark, sadistic sense of humour.
She's wearing my tie. How'd you like my tie? How do you like it?
My God. The tie.
Frenzy was criticised for the director's rather dated view of 1970s London, as if in the twilight of his career Hitchcock was reaching for the city of his memories, an earlier era of poverty and crime. But thanks to this lonely, difficult childhood and adolescence, Hitchcock spent much of his time in his own head, and this would give him the skills to visualise entire films as an adult before he'd even shot them. An obsessive planner, the actual making of the movies was never as much fun. He famously described actors as both cattle and children, and occasionally nodded off when they were shooting a scene. However, his meticulous technical ability behind the camera meant that his singular vision of each picture usually got to the screen. Always with a clever and conservative use of sound. North by Northwest shows this brilliantly. Screenwriter Ernest Lehman explained in a later interview how Hitchcock had always wanted to film a scene in the middle of nowhere, the camera able to turn 360 degrees around one man standing alone. Cary Grant is left in silence with only the hum of a distant plane for company. No dialogue, no music. The picture is the thing. It's a thrilling sequence that displays all Hitchcock's storytelling skills as a silent film director, developed from The Lodger, Downhill, The Ring and The Manxman, using landscape, threat and yet another wrong man on the run. Thanks for watching. Enjoy.
One final question. You've given a lot of audiences shocks sitting in the stalls. You've frightened me to death with Psycho. What frightens you?
Policemen.
Why?
I don't know. I'm scared of policemen. That's why I won't drive a car. If I don't drive a car, I can't get a ticket. Can't bear the suspense of waiting for the result of a ticket or a summons. I'm really quite distressed about it.
But you're very serious.
Yeah, I'm really absolutely serious about that, yes. I'm a very shy, mild, inoffensive individual. I hope not.
Yeah, I'm sorry.